is item B2, which was originally F2, approval to contract with Wade Trim to perform the Coastal Zone Management Waterfront Redevelopment Plan at a cost of $34,000, with $17,000 coming from a Coastal Zone Management Grant. Board members, we were recently awarded a $17,000 Coastal Zone Management Grant. The grant's to be used to prepare a waterfront redevelopment plan and requires a 50% match. We have proposed to provide some of that match through in-kind services, which is basically labor coming from our offices as well as help from the county. They offered assistance in the Planning and Economic Development Department. That totaled about $4,000 of labor, so our cash match would be $13,000. Wade Trim has assisted us in preparing the grant application. They've submitted a proposal to prepare the waterfront redevelopment plan. They've performed similar work for other communities in southeast Michigan. Wade Trim is also able to assist us with accepting the grant and satisfy all reporting and compliance requirements. One of the tricky parts of these grants is there's certain steps you have to follow, certain forms you have to submit, and rules that you have to follow relative to, because ultimately the money is federal money, and Wade Trim is familiar with that, so they can handle that task also. Any discussion or any questions? Mr. Newmer is here in the event that the board had any questions. We ultimately don't get the grant or have the ability to spend dollars on the grant until January 1st. Anything January 1st and later that we spend can be submitted for the 50% match. Anything prior to that, we can't do. So at this point, we just want to select the firm that would do the work.
I'll make a motion to contract with Wade Trim to perform the Coastal Zone Management Waterfront Redevelopment Plan at a total cost of $34,000, with $17,000 coming from the Coastal Zone Management Grant, $13,000 coming from the general fund, and the balance as in-kind services.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Caprell. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board, and thank you, Mr. Newmer.
Thank you, board members.
We appreciate all the input. I do appreciate Mr. Newmer coming out today in the event that board members did have questions. We appreciate his representation. Next on the agenda is item C, execute the employment contract for Fire Chief Mike Lopez. Board members, at previous meetings, we discussed the employment contract for our fire chief. As you know, we'd gone through a series of discussions and meetings. The board packet contains the proposed contract. I believe the original copies that were in there had all of the changes bolded in yellow. Primarily, it's a renewal of the same compensation, the same annual salary. It's a 2-year renewal with an agreement that it may be extended for a 3-year term. Some language. A 2-year term, I say.
I thought you said 3.
No, a 2-year term, and it can be extended for an additional 3-year term. So, which would make 5, but right now it's a 2-year contract. There was an update on the healthcare language, and then an acknowledgement that for the healthcare, if the contract's not extended, 70% retiree healthcare benefit. So I know we discussed that, we proposed that, we had the language drafted, approved by the attorney. So the contract that's before you is in essence what we discussed. About the only thing that we did discuss was whether or not there'd be a 3-year waiting period for the health care, and we discussed it back and forth, and the proposal came back in this format. So that's the contract that you have before you. I don't know if there's discussion, questions, or a motion.
Make a motion to approve the chief's contract as presented.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
support by Mr. Capral. Discussion, board members? I don't know if there is public comment. Typically, if there is public comment, we ask folks to sit in the on-deck chair. So if there's no discussion at this time, we'll open the floor for public comment.
Evening, board members. Matt Zarnecki, Secretary, Harrison Township Firefighter Association. On behalf of our membership, we are here tonight to strongly oppose the renewal of Chief Lopez's contract. Not only have you received the vote of no confidence, in which all 27 members of the fire department signed, you've received 12 additional letters from members with their own personal examples and feelings. These letters were from guys of all ranks, from battalion chief all the way down to firefighter. A yes vote sends a message that our concerns have fallen on deaf ears and are not being taken seriously. We are encouraging a no vote on the renewal of Chief Lopez's contract. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. If there's no board comment, then we have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Capral to execute the employment contract as presented for Fire Chief Mike Lopez. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board.
Thank
you, board members. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item D, 3 reappointments to the Planning Commission, terms to expire December 20, 2016. Board members, there are 3 members of the Planning Commission that have reached the end of their terms of appointment. Mr. Doug McDougall, Mr. Mark Batcha, and Mr. Michael Blum. All 3 members have served our community well and have been valuable members of the Planning Commission. All 3 have expressed a willingness to continue to serve. I would recommend the reappointment to the Planning Commission for a 3-year term to expire December 20, 2016. I'll also share, I did talk to the Planning Commission Chairwoman, and she felt that the Planning Commission's working in harmony and that the members fit together, and it was certainly her recommendation based on that conversation that these members be reappointed.
Mr. Supervisor, I'll go ahead and make that motion as stated.
All right?
Support.
Oh,
Let's
all right.
check.
All right.
Check.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Swakowski to reappoint Mr. Doug McDougall, Mr. Mark Batcha, and Mr. Michael Blum to the Planning Commission for a 3-year term to expire December 20, 2016. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Next is item E1 from our clerk's office. Mr. Witt?
Yes, at our last meeting, the board approved the introduction of ordinance 381, which will be granting Consumers Energy a 30-year, renewing their 30-year revocable franchise to provide natural gas service in the township. This will replace the expiring agreement, which is Appendix C in our Code of Ordinance. If the board adopts this ordinance, it shall take effect the day after publication. So we look, I guess I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 381, granting Consumers Energy Company, its successors and assigns the right power and authority to lay, maintain, and operate gas mains, pipes, and services on, along, across, and under the highways, streets, alleys, bridges, waterways, and other public places, and to do a local gas business in the Charter Township of Harrison, Macomb County, Michigan, for a period of 30 years, and to publish a notice of adoption, and that the full text may be reviewed in the clerk's office during business hours, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday.
There's a motion by Mr. Witt. Is there support?
Support.
Support from Mr. Tominello. Now, this is the second reading, is that true?
Yeah, it's the adoption.
Adoption, right, yep. All right. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing that there's no public comment? Nope. Mr. Witt, requires a roll call vote?
Yes. Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Swakowski?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkest?
Yes. All right, thank you. Continue to receive Consumers Energy gas. All right, next on the agenda, item F1, convey parcel 17-11-36-405-013 to Mr. and Mrs. Gary Kraus via a quitclaim deed for consideration in the amount of $1, contingent on said parcel being combined with parcel 17-11-36 405-014. Board members, the supervisor's office was approached by a resident at 34574, that's Jefferson, that's Mr. and Mrs. Gary Kraus. That's located on the lake shore on the south end of the township, regarding a 20-foot parcel of land adjacent to their lot that the township owns. That's the parcel in question, 013. This 20-foot strip of land is owned by the township. The 20-foot parcel is encumbered by an easement for a drain for the Macomb County Department of Roads. Large drain drains the ditch that runs along Jefferson, runs into this ditch, and runs underneath Jefferson and approximately 500 feet to Lake St. Clair. The lot at 34574, Mr. and Mrs. Kraus's home, or their lot, is 50 foot wide, and the home, their home that sits on the lot, is within, I believe it's a little less than a foot of the lot line. And because of that, their home is a non-conforming structure. Any modifications require variances to do. The home's rather old, I would guess maybe built in the 20s?
Yes.
Yep. The resident has incurred all legal expenses to investigate the transfer of the land. There is a substantial amount of maintenance on the lot that the township has not performed, primarily a lot of large and spindly trees that haven't been cleared over a period of time. A good portion of the property nearer to the home has been maintained by Mr. and Mrs. Kraus. We also have in writing that the property owner on the other side of this 20-foot parcel has has expressed in writing that they have no interest in acquiring any part of the parcel. If currently this parcel has deferred maintenance, it doesn't generate tax revenue. Transfer of this land to the resident will result in the parcel generating property tax revenue for years to come. In the process of investigating this parcel, I looked to other units of government. The Department of Roads, formerly the Road Commission, deals with this issue probably more regularly because of the fact that throughout the county, there are areas where they have alleyways or abandoned roadways. The whole area that's kind of intersected with Metro Parkway was originally platted with a whole series of roads. When Metro Parkway came through, it sort of went through and wiped that out, left little odd parcels of land throughout the area. Department of Roads had explained that when they have a 20-foot easement, typically in the form of an alley, they're willing to abandon it, not at their cost, but if people want to abandon it, they typically split it in half unless there's an interest or a reason. If this property were to be split in half and transferred to two people, we'd in essence be transferring a piece of land to someone and increasing their taxable value when they've made a claim that they're not interested in the land. They don't currently maintain it and have no need for it. So that was the reason why we proposed this. So that's the story. Are there any questions or is there a motion?
Did you, in this letter, it says, after the adjoining property owner to the abandoned fire lane and drain easement. Why would they write abandoned fire and drain easement if the drain easement has not been abandoned?
No. It isn't. The fire lane is abandoned. Clearly, it wouldn't be useful. We don't use fire lanes anymore. We don't, literally pull a truck down there to haul water out. But the fire lane, as it may have been once intended to be used, at this point, we can only really speculate why somebody platted this 20-foot strip and dedicated it to the township. But it's generally accepted, because this isn't an alleyway behind a bunch of backyards, that it was a fire lane. It's abandoned. The drain easement is not abandoned.
Is there a pipe underneath that?
Yes. Yep, and a pretty,
Then that's written though.
well, I suppose it's a function of English. I think the neighbor was trying to say that the abandoned fire lane and the drain easement between those two.
I'll make a motion to convey, oh, you done?
I was gonna make another comment.
Go ahead.
Okay.
As a steward of the community and going through many of these, and I dealt with one over on Duluth with the county directly. Every time that we have ever bought property or just take the school building, we've always received an appraisal I don't think that we're allowed as a township to just give somebody property for $1 and say, because the reason you would do that is because it would be swampland or maybe you know, over on Nautical Lane there, it's a retention pond, it really has no value. This property has value, and we know it has value because when it's conveyed and it's added to the property rolls, it is now going to have a value and it's going to be taxed. This is not a piece of property that, you know, is swampland or is, you know, something that isn't desirable.
But there's feasibly only
and-
two people
and-
in the entire world that will ever buy it.
And I understand that, Adam, but
And
at
if he
the
says, no, I don't want it for anything over $1, then it sits off the tax rolls forever.
well, then, if
And we
that's-
have to pay to maintain it.
And we have to spend money to maintain
okay,
it.
well, then if that's the case, that's the case.
I think that
But
is the
what
case.
I'm saying is, right over here, I believe this board dealt with the school issue on Lance Cruz here,
No,
where they built, or maybe it was the previous board.
prior board did.
We got $50,000 for that little strip of land.
Yeah, and I think it was
And-
frankly, I
and-
think it was a
and-
theft of the school.
And, well, that's fine, but if they're willing to pay for that, but at the end, when somebody goes to sell this property, they're getting a huge enhancement and the township just gave away an asset. And I understand that this
It's a-
20 feet, I get all that.
It's not an asset,
Okay.
it's a liability.
It's a liability, it's not an
Well,
asset.
we've never done anything
not
with that
buildable.
property.
Right.
Correct.
We have,
And I have no
that's
problem,
not
and
correct.
I have no problem.
We
I
have
no
done stuff on
problem-
that property. We
I
had to
have-
have gone down and cut down trees.
Excuse me, Mr. Witt.
Well, I wanna
am
correct- I wanna
talking.
correct your
I think
misstatement
you
before you get too
understand.
far down the road.
We've already talked about this. You understand what I'm saying. If you want to give away the property for $1, then
No,
you
I-
feel free to do that.
I just don't want you to
But
share
as a
false
steward-
information
As
to
a
the people.
steward of this community, Mr. Witt, I feel it's more appropriate that we get an assessment and get a reasonable offer. Reasonable offer might be $5,000. I don't know. But to just give away a piece of property that's gonna get attached, and they're gonna sell it at some point at a tremendous profit, that will be sold at a tremendous profit when you're increasing your property by, property's already 50 feet, so 20, what, maybe 40%? You're increasing your property, and that isn't gonna have a value to it. I think it does have a value to it, and I think as stewards of the community, we need to make sure that we're at least getting some type of value to that. It would be just like me saying, we have the 155 acres, it's swampland, there's kids out there riding their motorbikes, and why don't you give it to me for $1 because it's a liability for the township, and there's dead trees and things, and it's got deferred maintenance. That makes about as much sense as this does to me.
Yeah, 20 feet by 200 is the exact same as 155 acres. I got your point.
This is not buildable property, Darren. There's nothing we
I
can do with this
understand, but I
property.
just don't think that we're getting any reasonable offer for that property. And to do it without getting an appraisal on that, I personally think that it's possibly breaking a state law. Every other time we've done that, and even with the school district and buying that building, everybody was very clear that we had to have an appraisal on that property before the community could sell that property to a third party, even between the governments. And that keeps, things honest. And I'm not saying anything is funny here. All I'm saying is that keeps everybody on the straight and narrow, so nobody can come back and say, for any reason whatsoever, that anything was inappropriate.
Can we ask our attorney for a legal opinion? And
That's fine.
maybe you can offer some guidance as to Mr. York.
Well, there are a couple issues that were raised. First, whether or not you can do it. The Michigan Constitution does provide you can't give away a parcel of property because you're a steward of the taxpayers' money, but that'd be a property that has a fee interest in it that you have a whole bundle of rights to. This property does not meet that definition. This is more along the lines of vacating an alley, which has been permissible on behalf of municipalities. So you could do this without an appraisal. The next question is, do you want an appraisal? There's not a legal right or wrong answer on that. It's just whether that cost should be undertaken. there's very limited number of people that could do it. There are folks that could do it, but, remember, this proposal is to give away a quitclaim deed. It's not a whole bundle of rights, it's just some of the rights we own because it's a property that is hindered by these easements on it, so it's up to the board.
I think one of the things that clouds this is when we discuss the value of this land, Mr. York, you said it best, once it transfers to that property owner and it's bundled, it increases the value of their property. However, currently, I couldn't sell it to anybody else. I can never collect a dime of taxes on it, and I can pay a sum of money to maintain it for who knows what that period of time is. So part of the difficulty in saying, well, I'd like the property appraised, is the property has two appraisal prices. One is what it's worth to anybody else, and then two is what it's worth to the person who lives on one side of it or on the other side of it. Nobody would give you a dime for that property. The problem is, the very answer to the question that we're looking for, we already know. It has a value, a nice value to one person or the other. It has no value to either person.
And it will be enhanced by transferring it to this resident, because this resident will maintain it.
That's the argument, is that right now, it's not being maintained. In fact, we're incurring a liability not only in deferred maintenance, but in the event that one of those trees falls, that's a cost to us. We have a deductible on our insurance policy. We have certain expenses we have to maintain. We don't maintain the property. I think, Mr. Witt, you
We
indicated
have
it in the
spent
past.
money when trees have fallen,
Right, right.
How much money have we spent?
thousands of dollars. That's how,
How much?
You know what, Darren, if you would've asked me during the staff meeting, I could've gotten you a number. Today, I don't have that number in front
You
of me.
just brought it up.
No, I had said
You
during the
asked
staff
us.
meeting that trees had been taken down in the past, and that was where it was left.
Well, this is what I do know. When I asked the assessor at the staff meeting what the property value would go up, she said, now this isn't in stone, so it's not meant to be that way, but she said roughly $28,000. So that does have a value, and I would probably feel better about this if it was more than $1. If it was,
$2?
you know, $5,000 or $10,000.
But if I'm
Because when somebody sells that property, I'm gonna tell you that they're going from 50 to a 70-foot lot in the back. And if you look at the GIS, the folks, they've done a great job. It's groomed. Obviously, it looks like they've been using that property in the back. Maybe the front, it looked like had a few trees. Looking at the GIS, I didn't drive by there, but I know the backyard certainly was groomed, and I would assume, I don't know if it was them or somebody else using that property already, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But when you're just giving away property, I think it's a disservice to the citizens of the community.
Here's the other.
And I think we should be getting something more than just $1 for that.
Here's the other option, though. We spend money on our appraisal. The appraisal comes back and says, you know what, that number is $30,000. If I'm the guy that lives next to it, and I'm the one that was interested in taking it, I'm gonna go, you know what? If I need a variance, I'll pay the $400 and get a variance. I'm not gonna pay $30,000 for the property. And guess what, township? You guys are violating your ordinance by not keeping it up. So I want you to come out here and take care of it. And you're gonna spend that $30,000 in cutting down those trees. Whereas if you would have given me the property for some consideration, I would have done it. And then I'm gonna pay taxes on it for the rest of time. That's the way I'm looking at it at this point.
We're gonna
So will
earn
a
money
future
over
owner.
time.
And the resident has the use of that property today.
Right. Furthermore,
They're
when we
using
say,
it right now, you hit
well,
the nail on that, and I
right.
don't have a problem doing a lease
but
arrangement.
groomed and being used, I think it's important to understand, somewhere in the middle of my front yard is an imaginary line where the ownership of land ceases to exist. I groom the area somewhere in there. I shovel the driveway. But to say that I use it, I mean, practically every property owner, certainly in Harrison Township, but probably throughout our United States, has land that they groom and maintain. Whether or not they use it is a whole other argument. But the point is that right now, this township has owned for upwards close to 100 years a piece of land that we've maintained sparingly. We've incurred thousands of dollars, whatever that number is. At this point, it's kind of difficult to say. I'm sure we could have looked that up. And what we're looking to do is to solve, in essence, what is a problem. So,
I've been here 9 years, and have never, didn't even know for 9 years that we owned this little piece of property. So to say that it's a problem is just a falsehood. And I think we should be getting a little bit more money than what we're getting. And like I said, there's certainly a value more than $1. But don't say that you keep using the word deferred maintenance. That seems to indicate that we haven't spent very much money, and I'll be going to accounting tomorrow and
Well,
asking them
that's not what I mean.
specifically for the amount of money that we spent on that property, not in the last year, but in the last 20 years. And I will forward that on to the board, and I am sure that it is not the thousands of dollars that Mr. Witt is saying that it is.
You know what, I'm gonna go that, I knew that that property was there, so I'm gonna guess I had a little better picture as to what was there, whereas you didn't know for the last 9 years.
I feel like if we spend $2, we went backwards.
Well,
if
and
we-
it's
if
it's
we-
also important to
if we
understand.
transfer this, we're gonna collect tax money for 20 years, 30 years, however long.
Forever.
So, yeah, so
Forever.
I mean, to me, we're already losing money on this property.
Let me describe the confusion maybe you had on deferred maintenance. There are dead trees on that property. Every once in a while, one of those dead trees just falls over due to the wind. When it falls, we can't ignore it. It's no longer deferred. It's necessary because someone may have a power line down, or they may not be able to get out of her driveway. To me, if I had a neighbor who was living next door to me and he had a bunch of dead trees right next to my parcel of land, and when the wind blew, it covered up my driveway, at some point I'd say, gee whiz, can't you go out there and have somebody take these trees down? You're gonna have to pay to do it eventually, but every time it does, it busts up my fence or it trashes my landscaping, and it's gonna have to be done. That's the deferred maintenance that
Has
I'm
that
describing.
happened?
Yes,
Is-
that's what Mr. Witt's talking about. When those
I
trees
don't
fall, we have to
know
clean
that.
those up. Well, there's,
How many trees have fallen?
let me ask you this, how many?
Can I just, Mr. Witt, how many trees have fallen on that property?
A specific number, I don't know, but it's happened more than once.
Well,
And I know I've spoken,
when politicians sit here and say it's thousands of dollars, it's this and that, if you know the property, like you say you do, you should be able to say, from being the deputy supervisor, you know what, I remember there might have been 1 or 2 trees at some point that fell down and we had to clean it up.
I would say
I
it was at
certainly know
least
that I
2
would-
times, because I know I've spoken with Mr. Kraus several times in the past, when trees have fallen, then we've had to have a tree service come out there and clean them up. I would say, I can think of off the top of my head at least 2, Darren.
Well, that's a fair answer.
Mr. Supervisor, I just want to say that anytime we can increase tax revenue through adding parcels onto our tax rolls, I think that's a plus. I think this is a good idea. You know, I have another property other than my own in Harrison Township next to a vacant lot that's wooded, and for many years I couldn't do anything about it. It was an eyesore, so I know how both of these folks feel living next to that parcel. I guess the only thing I'd be interested in looking at is, I'd want 2 things. I'd like to see that these 2 parcels, so the parcel 014 and 013, are replatted as one parcel.
Yep, that's our requirement. Yep.
So I want to make sure that's done. Second of all, I guess what I'd ask for the property owner is to provide us with a plan on how they're going to improve the property. You know, are they going to take trees down? Are they going to grade? Whatever they're going to do. I think that's the least we can ask from them if we do this transfer.
Yep. Well, the property owner is here. However, in the process of trying to, this is a bit of a conundrum for me. Clearly, and Mr. York pointed this out, we don't regularly get this kind of a request. We don't have these little odd parcels. And it is a little awkward to deal with. Probably the reason why for 80 or 90 years nobody's done anything. Because there is a party that wonders, well, is this the responsible way to treat this property? I tried to consult with people from other communities, from other municipalities to see how they handle this, and this is what I got. In fact, we have somewhere else in the township a road right-of-way that just basically points right into the river, the Clinton River, and it's 80 foot wide. And I've asked, said, boy, you know, that just seems like something that should be sold. Oh, no, you can't sell it. It just boggles my mind to think that I can have an 80-foot piece of land on the river, but I'm limited in being able to sell it. Well, I can't wrap my mind around that because I think somebody would say, yes, I'll buy that. There is value. I think for the right price, maybe any citizen would say, hey, that's a good deal, I'll buy that. This, I can't see that value in. But in the interest, or in the process of investigating this, I have met Mr. Kraus a few different times. He'd indicated to me that it is not possible to build on this land. It is encumbered by that easement. However, on the other side of his property, his setback, his side yard setback is large enough to allow for the addition. And he'd indicated that he'd like to do some construction on the first floor. So with this, not only comes the additional tax revenue associated with a larger parcel of land, but the property owner has indicated that he wants to clean up the woods and the trees that are on there. At a bare minimum, if they fall on his driveway, I'm not gonna get the call for it. But he also has indicated that he'd like to physically improve the structure, and now, with these two lots combined into one, the property would be conforming, and he'd have the freedom to do that without being at the whim of the zoning board.
Sure.
And I dare say, I would hate to see the situation of the zoning board say, well, you know what, if we said, no, we refuse to sell this, or we can't agree on a fair way to do it, and they go before the zoning board, suppose the zoning board could say, well, we don't see a need to give you a variance, you should acquire that 20-foot parcel, then your property be conforming. I mean, you know, I hate to see these people caught in this trap.
I'll make a motion to convey parcel number 1711364053 to Mr. and Mrs. Gary Kraus via a quitclaim deed for consideration in the amount of $1, contingent on said parcel being combined with parcel number 1711364054, commonly known as 34574 Jefferson.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Brado, with support by Mr. Caprell. I know we've had a fair amount of discussion. I don't know if there is further discussion, or if we should open up the floor.
The only thing I'd like to make, you know, and although you say it's combined, I would like to say that it gets replatted as one parcel.
Right,
Well,
it
it's-
is a combination process. The assessor's office does it.
It
What
wouldn't
happens?
be a replat.
No.
It's a combination.
Right, right. So what happens is they will literally record, our assessor's office, we do this from time to time. If there's two parcels to be combined, that cost is a $350 cost, plus $50 per child. Will be one child. So regularly, when people take two lots, combine them into one, this is done fairly regular.
Would you consider just making then subject to attorney's review of the documents? We'll have their attorney prepare all these documents, and your motion would be contingent on me reviewing that those things happen. And then I'll just double check it. There wouldn't be a cost to the township. He'll do the work.
So I've got an amendment to, at the end, subject to township attorney's review of all documents.
Yes.
Was that acceptable?
Yep. Yes.
Continued support? Okay. Further discussion? If not, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
How you doing? William Bardell, 17-year resident. I think these are the kind of I agree with both points of view, but in this age and the age of our community, we don't have cornfields north of Hall Road anymore. If you look out there, you gotta realize we're competing with new construction. I understand your point, get some money for it, but if this guy's been cutting that lawn and maintaining it for the last 30 years, and he wants to make his cottage a house where you get more tax money, you're increasing the value. These are kind of things that we have to look at, thinking outside the box. We can say, no, you're going to have a cottage. This community's been a cottage community when everybody lived in Detroit. No, well, we don't have cornfields north of Hall Road anymore, so we're competing with Macomb Township. Ask all your assistants and your deputies about why they live in Macomb Township or why they live in West Bloomfield. There's reasons for it. We're competing with them. We've got to think outside the box. This guy can fix his house up. That 20-foot, no one even knew it was there. I know it's worth $20,000, but you know what? I take my hat off to him. I think it's a good idea. These are the kind of things we've got to do. We're competing with other municipalities, other townships. We want to get young professional people in our areas to improve our areas, our curb appeal to our township, and I think this is a great idea. So I take my hat off to him. He gets a 20-foot by whatever, 350, I take my hat off to him. He's been cutting it for years. He's gonna add on to his house. He's gonna increase the curb appeal to Harrison Township. You know, since we're not backfilling any more, swampland and building fire stations and strip plazas that are gonna be empty, and we're not gonna develop every single square inch of Harrison Township, because, you know, after that happens, of course, all the people are gonna move out. I think this is a great idea, thinking outside the box. I think it's a great idea. We're competing with other townships to get young professional people in our township. I think it's a great idea. More money, bring it in. I understand it's worth 20,000 or whatever, but hey, guy got lucky. Good deal, thanks.
Thank you.
Bill Serville, resident. First of all, I disagree with the fact that he's the only person interested in it. I know for a fact, just 2 miles south of there, there's four duplex condominiums that have a 20-foot strip that goes to the lake, and that added money to the value of those condos because they have lake access. You could use it for a boat launch, you could use it for swimming, just for recreation. I suggest you go and try to put this up and see if some subdivision's interested in it, and see if there is someone else interested. I'd buy it for $1, just on speculation. But I have another issue. Is this the same parcel that we spent close to $100,000 to replace pipe in on an emergency basis with the county because there was holes in the top of the pipe and it collapsed? Is this the same parcel? Well, how many drains do we have that go into the lake? All right. At any rate, what's going to happen to that pipe? Who's going to be responsible for that pipe if this parcel becomes private property? Is the homeowner going to be responsible? Is the township going to be responsible? Or is the county road commission? You know, it's still going to stay a road easement, I would assume. All right. And finally, the value is there. Not as much, but lake frontage is different than an easement that goes nowhere, an abandoned alley or something. I think that it's a mistake. I agree with Mr. York that there should be more than $1 here. I don't know what the value is. I don't know that you have to spend a lot of money to find out. I gave you one suggestion. Go out and see if somebody else is interested in it. You know, 20 foot on the lake is worth something. You go up north, and every lake up north has these kind of things, and they're used by all of the people in the subdivision. I know one subdivision I built a house in up 17 miles north of the bridge that there's 1,000 lots on the west side of Gratiot that all have lake access through something just like we're talking about here. So don't say it doesn't have any value to anyone else. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to be able to name all of the drains in the south end of the township that run to the lake. I do know of this particular one, which is a county road drain. The Department of Roads, they maintain that easement. They possess, or they own, they have rights with that easement. This drains, the ditches that run, all the drains that run along Jefferson, obviously have a high point and a low point. The low point is on the far side of the road, runs underneath and runs out. The next drain that I'm aware of in this area is actually on Waterfront Park. So the north or east corner or edge of Waterfront Park has a similar easement. And if you visit Waterfront Park, you know that in that far corner, there's sort of an area where the seawall just stops, and sometimes debris collects there. The geese like to kind of hang out there from time to time. That's where at least one of the other road drains are. The drain that the resident referred to is a county drain that was maintained by Public Works. We were assessed the maintenance for that because of a drain district that falls in our area. That drain is different than the road drain. But this drain I know is Department of Roads So I'd confirm that. I know that's the case. So there is a difference there certainly between the county Department of Roads and county Public Works Department. So that's one of the questions. Relative to making the property available to someone else, I think that we as a board have to be mindful that if we were to take action that said, hey, let's put it out there, and who knows, maybe somebody buys 4 or 5 lots across the street, decides to put up a little condo development, has a little walkway. On one hand, I think that's nice, but we have to be mindful that the edge of this 20-foot strip of land, many, many years ago, we didn't think about things like side yard setbacks. We didn't have zoning in the 20s. You owned a piece of land, you could build a house on it. Well, that's what's occurred here. I don't think it would be reasonable to say that I'm going to erect an 8-foot privacy fence 6 inches from the side of a guy's house so that people can have access. We have to be mindful that the actions that we take with that land have an impact on 2 existing property owners, and I'd be concerned that putting that parcel of land out to the general public could result in a burden and probably a liability in terms of a civil liability to the township. It may not be a responsible way to handle that land.
I think, what would happen, Mr. Hoop, like Mr. Servil just said, if another resident, right, because there's 25,000 residents in this community, and I'm not against eventually whatever, combining these properties. Let me be straight on that. But what would happen, 25,000 residents own this property right now. What happens if, like Mr. Servil said, somebody said, hey, I'll give you $5 for that? What would happen if somebody took us to court and said that their rights were hindered? I don't know the answer to that question because I've never seen it that way. But what I do know is on the property on Duluth, when the road commission was going to convey that to the 2 property owners, we all know that property over there on Duluth, they had a public hearing, they allowed people to come in and voice their opinion, they made sure that there was no other interested party that was gonna come back and sue them later, and then they were gonna convey it to the 2 property owners. In that case, it was 50-50. It's a little different than this because the 2 property owners wanted all ownership on that, but they went through this whole process and then finally got down to it. It was gonna be about, I think it was about $5,000 for documents and title searches and things of that nature that they were gonna split, and the one party decided that they didn't wanna split the cost of that.
You know, if that happened, Mr. York, I'd say, Judge, we're in court today, somebody's arguing about what the township board did. They should have been at the meeting. We gave notice to the whole community what the price was going to be. We had a public hearing. Nobody came and expressed any interest in the property. What more could the township do? There's nothing reasonable that could be done with this property but give it to one of the 2 owners. One doesn't want it, the other one, it's in the township's best interest to do. I think it's completely defensible if that sort of action happened.
Well, and I think it's also important to recognize, as I tried to point out, the action that we're taking is not contrary to what other municipalities and other arms of government do with odd parcels of land that don't have value. We're not talking about the 155-acre parcel deeding it to the guy who lives on the edge of it. We're talking about a 20-foot strip of land that has a very, very limited value. But this notion of abandoning a small strip of land that doesn't have a commercial value is not unique to this scenario, although it doesn't happen in our township frequently. The course of action that we're proposing to take here is what our neighboring communities or neighboring municipal, government partners do on a regular basis. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Brada with support by Mr. Capral to convey parcel 171136405013.
I have one other question. Does anybody on this board have a personal relationship with the applicants?
I do not.
Okay,
I do not.
that's fair.
No? Okay. Again, we have a motion by Mr. Brada with support by Mr. Capral to convey parcel 171136405013 to Mr. and Mrs. Gary Kraus via a quitclaim deed for consideration in the amount of $1, contingent on said parcel being combined with parcel number 171136405014, commonly known as 34574 Jefferson, and subject to township attorney's review of all documents. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on the agenda is item G from the Treasurer's Office. Mr. York?
Actually, we were having a discussion, and Adam added that, and I received BL 4029 from Adam, so I'm good.
All right. So there's no need to take action?
Adam sent me an Ls 4029 on behalf of the township, and I will be collecting the taxes based on.
I don't see how you could vote contrary to a voter-approved issue.
The item that the reason we were speaking about is because the way the millage is worded, when you had
Okay.
put it together for the board, was that it's an up to amount.
Yes.
So in the past, with our general operating millage, we've had an up to, but the board has had a general understanding as to what that number was always going to be, and we approve it during the budget process. With this item, as it is a sort of outside of the norm of how we have done things in the past, Mr. York was questioning what that level was. I think the intent of the board was to levy that full amount in the first year, and then if the ability is there to scale it back in future years, that we are able to do that with an up to language. But I guess just for the purpose of clarification, so
And if the board
we
wants
make,
to
we
make a
make sure
motion,
we
go
dot all
ahead.
the i's and cross all the t's,
Go
and
ahead.
we have a motion for this year to levy that full amount would probably make sense, just so that we have everything in order and Mr. York has clear authority to move forward with that billing, because you have to get it done, what, end of the month here? Yeah, you have to
We've
submit,
already,
I mean, you have to submit everything,
we're moving forward. Yeah.
so.
And I think, you know, what, part of the discussion that we had leading up to this, you know, prior to the agenda being set, was that any of the literature that we saw, you know, referred to what does this cost? Well, or what does this generate? The numbers weren't based on, well, it could generate any amount, and it may be this amount or that amount. The numbers that were discussed throughout this whole process, I think by this board and by the literature that voters were exposed to, was $500,000, $414,000, you know, and, you know, $35 for an average home, or, you know, all of these kinds of statistics. So I think the costs were made clear to the residents, and I think when they voted on it, I think that was their intent. But I agree that it may be responsible for this board to establish right here and now, by means of a simple motion, that the amount that should be levied for that millage for 2014 would be 0.5 mils. I think that was your suggestion, Mr. Webb? Would you be willing to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right,
I'll support.
all right. We've got a motion by Mr. Switkowski with support by Mr. Tominello to authorize 0.5 or 1/2 of a mil for 2014 for the fire village. Discussion?
Is that clear enough? I mean, does that make sense, that for 2014, do you think that's the right wording for you
Yeah.
to collect for this first
If you
year
want
of
to
the
bring it
millage?
back in 2015, then that would be the wording.
Okay, I just want to make sure that it's not,
If you
if you're
wanna-
like, no, I'm billing in
That's for
December of this
2014,
year.
that's it. That's what-
I just wanna make
No,
sure.
we're billing now for 14.
I just want to make sure
That
that
would be
that's
correct,
clear.
and the millage language said for 14, 15, 16, but, you know, we'll bring it back in 15 and 16. I mean, the board was very clear that night that it might be up to, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. All right, further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment. Did you wish to speak on this?
No,
Okay. All right, no problem. All right, well, if there's no further discussion and seeing no public comment, this doesn't require a roll call vote, does it?
No.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Switkowski, with support by Mr. Tominello, to authorize 1/2 or 0.5 mils for the fire millage for 2014. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next, we will open up the floor for public comments.
How you doing? William Bardell, 17-year resident, Harrison Township. First thing I would like to say is, as I said before, north of 21, we don't have cornfields there anymore. Second thing I'd like to say is, we do now have a ordinance officer. His job, I know he gets the higher scale as an inspector. That was the agreement. His job is 99% ordinance enforcement. Whether it be blight, trees growing in rain gutters, gutters falling off houses, cinder blocks on front lawns, cars parked on back patios. Blight attracts blight, I can tell you that. Cleanliness attracts cleanliness. I understand if our ordinance officer subs for the building department, 2 weeks in the winter, a guy goes skiing, 2 weeks in the summer, the guy goes to Traverse City, whatever, that's fine. I understand the building department was left in shambles, always short of help. But I think if we need to hire 2 inspectors, I think we should hire 2 inspectors. The trend for the economy is generally upward. I know they just passed health care reform because our gross domestic product was 17% health insurance, so something had to be done. So whether we like it or not, we've got health insurance reform. Now, whether that brings down the cost from competition, that's a whole nother talk show. But basically, we now have an ordinance officer. You can call him 24/7, make your complaint. He'll call you back. He won't tell you he's got bigger fish to fry or anything like that. He'll take care of your problem, so you can call him. He'll take care of this blight. He'll take care of cars parked on back patios, cinder blocks on front lawns, trees growing in gutters, stuff like that. With that being said, if we need to hire 2 building inspectors, you hire 2 building inspectors. I know they have to have health insurance, retirement, or whatever. That's normal. That's how you do business. But the general trend of the economy is upwards. It's a slow recovery, and I think we can have 2. I think we really can have 2 good full-time employees. And like I said, the trend for the economy is a slow, steady recovery, and I think it's doable. So we do have an ordinance officer, 24/7. You can make your complaint on blight or anything like that. The reason why, as Mr. Servio was saying and Jack was saying, we are competing. Who do we want to be as Harrison Township? Do we want to attract young, professional families to our area? So they move in, they live there 60, 70, 80 years, they pay our taxes, they go to our schools, they keep our curb appeal up, they take care of their house, they fix up their house. It's attractive. We all want those people. I know Macomb Township wants them, West Bloomfield wants them. We all want to attract those young professional families to our neighborhood. We don't want slumlords. We want homeowners because they invest in their house. If you have a rental property, you will generally take care of your own house better than you would a rental property. So, with that being said, I think we should have hired 2 inspectors with full benefits. Okay? And have Mr. Sternicki continue his good work that he's doing on fighting blight and making our area desirable to homeowners, and homeowners who will stay and pay our taxes. Since we're not digging up and backfilling any more wetlands and building strip plazas or fire stations or homes or anything anymore like they did years ago, we have to compete with new construction to the north. Macomb Township pulled 350 permits. So we're competing with new construction. We've got to keep and maintain and retain professional young people to our township. Thank you. Keep up the good work, people.
Phil Servio, Chairman of the Cable Committee. To my knowledge, this board has not taken action yet on a uniform franchise agreement for WOW. I believe that's neglectful of you, although it, according to the franchise agreement from the state, if we don't take action within 30 days of notification, that it's automatically in force. So, but to my knowledge, you haven't taken any action, and I just wonder why you haven't. It's something that you're supposed to deal with as a board. My second issue is I went on tonight to verify that yesterday wasn't a holiday for the trash people, and I see that there's a workshop for 2014 budget that's going to be held shortly. I would strongly urge you to try to figure out where to get some money for demolition. Last meeting, you reappropriated the $30,000 that had been set aside, and I understand why you had to do that. You know, better to do that than to lose it. And from what my understanding is, even if that money were still available, it's not worthwhile to try to pursue it. Plus, it's only for the south end of the township, I believe. So, to reiterate, we have houses, we have 2 homes that are in dire need of coming down right now, that if the money were there, you guys could approve it, and the Housing Board of Appeals has already acted on those. There's an issue whether or not the Housing Board of Appeals has been acting legally, but I will say this: no one has ever, since 2006, gone to circuit court and appealed any of the actions that we've taken. So that speaks volumes in my mind. They must have felt that it was appropriate, or they would have gone to court. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Is there any board comment?
Make a motion to adjourn?
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
Support. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, meeting adjourned. Thank you, board members.
Alrighty. So I don't know if I'm gonna make, it depends what time, 'cause we're probably gonna fish till 3, I don't know how long, it's probably about 3.5 hours.
Lake or river fishing?
We're going to Manistee, on the Manistee River.
Been a
So
river.
it's gonna be probably 3.5, 4 hours, I don't know.